Oh, thank you.
All right, I'm going to get started. I want to say hello to everybody and,
Okay.
welcome everybody. My name is Hilary Helstein and I'm the director of the Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival. I want to welcome you to our program today. This is the second film in our Courageous Conversation series. And we are very proud to have the opportunity, finally, to premiere the documentary Aulcie in Los Angeles. And we are honored to be hosting this Q&A webinar today with an extraordinary panel of speakers, especially as it occurs in the same week as the Lakers won the NBA championship. I try to wear something that was Maccabi, and it's a little Maccabi and a little Lakers, so I tried my best. There we go, Dani. I hope that our audience has been able to watch the film in advance of the discussion today. And for those of you who have come on to the Zoom first and haven't seen the film yet, you can still buy a ticket to see the film after the Q&A today. We will extend that period for another 24 hours. I know some people did not receive the link, so if you have any problems, please send an email to the Jewish Film Festival, and we will make sure that you get the link. Before we get started, I have people that I would like to thank. First, we are grateful to our sponsors of the program, the Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles. I would like to thank Consul General Dr. Hillel Newman and the staff, Consul of Public Diplomacy, Jonathan Barrell, Hope Boonshaft, and Carolyn Ben-Natan for their support. Thank you. I would also like to thank our sponsors, the LA Jewish Film Festival sponsors, as well as our presenting organization, the Jewish Journal, and to Hey Jude Productions and Oded Horowitz for giving us the opportunity to share this film with you. I want to thank our partners and others involved in helping spread the word to all of our guests, including the African American Film Critics Association and to KJ Matthews, the Lake Arrowhead Film Festival, the KPFK Film Club, the Hollywood Lit Retreat, and many synagogue partners. And I would also like to thank the producers of the Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame for giving us their short film that's currently running on our website, which I think you'll find very interesting and very much a tie-in to Aulcie. What can we say about Aulcie Perry? One review said, Aulcie Perry is Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar all rolled into one. Aulcie Perry is an American from Newark, New Jersey, and became a basketball legend in Israel. He became an international phenomenon, a remarkable athlete who captured the spirit of a nation and put Israel on the map. He was congratulated by prime ministers who said he helped bring honor to the people of Israel. In Israel, his name became a generic phrase for a tall person. One Israeli might remark to another that her child had grown into a real Aulcie Perry. But before his rise to celebrity status in Israel, he faced racism, hardship, and discrimination in New Jersey, and basketball saved his life. Dani Menkin, in a recent interview, said, "In a time when things are highly politicized and divided, it's a perfect time to remind people of the strong relationship between Black people and Jewish people by sharing Perry's wonderful love story with Israel." During this unprecedented time, with coronavirus, systemic racism, and an upcoming election, this film raises many questions and offers us the opportunity to examine our humanity, our fragility, and the opportunity to come together and unite stronger as one. This film is a call to action and a vehicle to educate. And I want to thank my friend Dani for creating a powerful and inspiring film, and to Aulcie Perry for opening up his most private life to all of us. Now, I'm very excited to introduce our panelists. And as you can see, we have on the screen Director Dani Menkin, Aulcie Perry himself, the Consul General of Israel, Dr. Hillel Newman, Producer Jon Weinbach, journalist KJ Matthews, and Chris, let us see your face, because today you're not going to be LAJFF and composer Chris Gubish. And you're going to hear more from each of them momentarily and about each of them. But first, Dani, I would like you to say a few words. And following Dani, we're going to hear a few words of introductory remarks from Dr. Newman. So Dani.
Yeah. So Hilary, thank you so much. I'm honored to be with so many wonderful people. And Hilary and I were talking about making this event and honoring Aulcie and his story for such a long time. And I don't know what happened in the world in 2020, but some of our plans have changed for some reasons. And at least we're meeting here online. And I want to thank General Consul Hillel Newman that just told me that as soon as possible, we will also do a real event. And Hillel will also talk about it, because there is nothing like meeting people in person. And for me, Aulcie was my childhood hero. I mean, he's still my childhood hero. I think when Aulcie and I are making, movies is what I love. Basketball is what he loves. And I think we combine those things together. We're still like kids. And I'm very honored that we have here Ahuva. Say hi. The movie will not be able to happen without Ahuva, that literally, changed Aulcie's life. And I want to thank Asaf Zellner, who I know is with us, and he has done the animation. And so many others. Sierra, his daughter, that just texted me that I think she's on Facebook. Drew, our editor. You mentioned Christopher Gubish, Nancy Spielberg, Ori Eisen. I think Tal Brody may come and be with us, but if he will, let us know. And of course, you, Hilary, the Giving Back Fund, and my friend Jon Weinbach, who is helping me, supporting me in so many movies. And, when I met Jon, and we made the movie On the Map, which Aulcie Perry has a lot to do in the miracle story that we had in 1977. And one of the first events that I met Jon was the screening with all his childhood heroes of the Lakers, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Magic was just next to us. And it was so interesting because you see all those really national heroes, but what Jon is really interested in talking to me about Tal Brody and about Aulcie Perry, because he knows he captured the heart of the nation. So I'm very honored to work with him also on this and so many other good stories from Israel. So yeah, Hilary, I'm bringing it back to you and to Hillel Newman and later to John, KG Matthews. It's an honor for us. It really was important and part of the story to show the bridge that Aulcie represents with his story, with his character between African-American, Israel, Jews. We all have same background. We all suffered from the same things. So there was always a big bond between us. And Aulcie, with his unbelievable life story and the love story that he has between him and Israel, between him and Tammy, always was a bridge. And that's why I think this film is very much close to my heart. And I'm very honored. And I always told Aulcie, thank you for letting me be the one to tell your story. I know it wasn't easy, and I'm honored.
Thank you, Dani. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Hillel Newman. He assumed the post of Consul General of Israel in July 2019, where he serves as the senior representative of the State of Israel to the Pacific Southwest. Consul General Newman is a highly respected author, academic, and statesman. Dr. Newman's diplomatic experience includes serving as policy advisor to 3 foreign ministers, ambassador to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and deputy consul general in Boston. Most recently, as both special policy advisor to the Director General and as director of the World Jewish Affairs Department, Consul General Newman has been intimately involved in the most current and pressing issues on the global Jewish agenda. And Consul General Newman made Aliyah to Israel from South Africa. We'd like to welcome you, Dr. Newman.
Thank you so much, Hilary. It's such a pleasure for me to join such a distinguished panel. The producers, director producers, executive producers, KJ, and Aulcie, of course. First and foremost, thanks to the Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival for partnering with us. We're proud to be partners with you. Look, there's so much to say, but I'll just start off with a short word of saying that the story of Aulcie is such a powerful, fascinating human story. And that doesn't matter what the circumstances are or whether you knew the story in real lifetime or not. For those who witnessed the events real time, like me, it's so much more powerful and intriguing. And I'd just like to share with you that I grew up in Israel. As Hilary mentioned before, I immigrated to Israel when I was a young kid. And I was a teenager at the time that Maccabi Tel Aviv was playing these games and beat the Moscow team. And I was a teenager swept up in these events, witnessed firsthand how the entire state of Israel was engulfed in these occurrences. The love of Aulcie was something that a total consensus in the state of Israel. And it's so, Dani Menkin mentioned earlier that his childhood memories for him, well, his childhood memories and an existence for me as well, just like so many millions, you could say, who lived in Israel at the time. Today, as a representative of the state of Israel, I'd like to add one more dimension to this. And that is that the story goes way beyond Aulcie. I don't know whether Aulcie will like this or not, but his shoulders are bearing a responsibility which is way beyond the personal story of Aulcie. It has political significance, it has strategic significance, and even social justice significance. In the political sphere, of course, a lot has been spoken with the On the Map about the political significance of the Cold War and how the victory at the time over Moscow had a lot more than just sport significance. It was political and a lot of political significance, even though Aulcie might not have wanted to bear this responsibility. But even today, it's connected to the US-Israel relationship. And I'd like to explain in what way. You know, the movie depicts Rabin, Prime Minister Rabin, when he said that the story of Maccabi Tel Aviv just shows how Israel can achieve anything, as long as it has a little bit of American assistance. And Aulcie was that American assistance which allowed the state of Israel, the small, tiny state of Israel, to beat Moscow. And that was the morale, it was the entire national morale in the state of Israel at the time, that Israel can achieve just about anything with Aulcie, with a person like Aulcie. So it had a lot of national significance as well. I'd just like to add also the social justice aspect, that today we're trying to bridge communities, and Aulcie can play such a great part also in bridging different communities, bridging Jews and African Americans, bridging Israel and the American community and the African American community. So I don't know whether Aulcie wants to carry the responsibility, but I think that the movie is amazing, wonderful movie, depicts the personal life story of Aulcie so well, but it also goes way beyond the personal story of Aulcie. I'd like to congratulate everybody who's involved in the making of this movie and the creation of this wonderful piece of art. And I'd like to thank again the Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival for partnering with us, and thank you to my Consul for Public Diplomacy and my team for organizing this partnership. Thank you. A pleasure for me to be with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, really.
Now, I'm going to introduce our panelists so we can get into our discussion. And Aulcie needs no introduction. Dani Menkin, as you've now heard from, is the extraordinary talent behind Aulcie, which is the sequel to On the Map. Dani's other films include Dolphin Boy, Picture of His Life, all films that we've shown throughout the years. Dani and I have had a very long-standing friendship going back to 39 Pounds of Love, where we showed in, I think, the first or second year of our film festival. Dani is a 30-plus time award winner for his films and a twice Israeli Academy Award winner for 39 Pounds of Love and Is That You? Jon Weinbach is the producer and will be our moderator today. He's an American film and television writer and producer. He currently works, tell me if I have this right, Jon, as the executive producer and executive vice president for Mandalay Sports Media. Am I right? Good. He was a producer on the acclaimed series, The Last Dance, among many other sports documentaries. And he also produced Dani's film On the Map. So welcome to Jon.
Thank you for having me.
And I'd like to introduce KJ Matthews, who is joining us today from the African American Film Critics Association. KJ is an accomplished award-winning journalist, writer, producer, public speaker, and media consultant. For 10 years, she successfully helped shape CNN's entertainment, digital, and TV content. She played a major role in a number of primetime entertainment specials and series and contributed to CNN's Heroes. And again, Chris, please come out of your LAJFF hiding spot. Many of you have been on our webinars before and see Chris helping me out. And as talented as Chris is with Zoom, he's even more gifted with music. Chris is the amazing award-winning composer of Aulcie and two of Dani's other films, Picture of His Life and 39 Pounds of Love. So I'd like to welcome you all today.
Bye, guys.
Before we get started, one last thing. I have something that we would all like to present to Aulcie. So Aulcie, on behalf of the festival, the consulate, and our panel, we are honored to recognize you today with a special award for your contributions to combating racial discrimination and to building bridges of understanding across race and religion between African Americans and Jews and Israelis.
Wow.
Probably can't
Thank you so much.
see it, but
Wow,
Chris
yeah,
can
thank
go
you so
for it,
much.
Chris.
Wow. Thank you so much, really.
Wow, so touching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Means a lot. Means a lot.
Thank you.
It means a lot to Aulcie, I'm sure. For us, for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything you've done for us, for Israel,
Thank you.
and for the world.
Oh.
And now I would like to turn it over to Jon.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I will not waste any time because I think there's so many interesting perspectives to hear about the film, and I apologize for this glamorous backdrop. I do a lot of work in sports. I'm in the bowels of the stadium for LAFC, Major League Soccer team in Los Angeles. We're shooting here today, so apologize for that. But I wanted to jump into this because I'll start with Dani, who I obviously know, and I think very early on when you were making On the Map, you had already sort of had in your head, hey, a scripted project and maybe it could be a documentary project on Aulcie, just because, there's so many great parts of the Maccabi 77 story, Tal Brody, Ralph Klein, there's 100 of them. But Aulcie is such a transformative figure for the team and for his role, just sort of bridging cultures, and also just so unlikely for the time, especially to make this leap. It's not like now where Maccabi Tel Aviv is kind of a global accepted brand where lots of foreign players go. This was like the hinterlands of global basketball at the time. So we were making the film for On the Map, and then what was the process to sort of hone in on, hey, there's probably, as great as much as we've covered in On the Map, I think we can actually go deeper into this story, and how did you go through that process and getting the project going?
Yeah, we share the same thing, the love for our childhood hero and the fact that we're very fortunate to be in the place of telling their stories. And when we tell the stories in our perspective, On the Map was really a story of a team. And what Tal Brody and the Aulcie Perry and the American basketball player that came to Israel and changed the country have done was unbelievable. But we always knew that Aulcie Perry as a person has much more than that and much more to tell. And the story crosses from 1977 and crosses also from the sports section. The love story between him and Tammy, for many people, was the big deal. They were the Bredjolina of the country. It's not Bredjolina right now. Is he back with Jen? I don't know. You tell me. You know? But it was really the big thing that happened then. And then, you know, with all the hardship and what the challenges that he faced in his life and the fact that he overcame them. And today he lives in Israel, and I always like to make the joke that he lives in Israel and I live in America. and he really represents the country, and he really loves the country. So I think, you know, there is so much in Aulcie, and the way he made a full circle of redemption by looking for his daughter, by finding her, by going back to Israel, by, you know, showing with his lectures that he's giving now to others, you know, how can you cope with success? All those things are things that, you know, are aligned with the stories that I wanted to tell. And I know, John, you were working on, we mentioned Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we mentioned one guy, Michael Jordan. But for me, you know, Aulcie Perry, not only the fact that he had some stories in North Carolina, Aulcie Perry was always the guy, you know, the person that really changed the country.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I remember we talked about this when we made On the Map, and you know, The Last Dance is a different kind of project and a different scope, but, you know, it says something about that story, the 77 story. Think about, and one of the challenges for those of you who've seen both films, or maybe you've seen none of them, you know, the film On the Map tells the story of how the 77 Maccabi Tel Aviv team came together, the journey of their championship. But there were so many individual strands of that story that, frankly, we had to cut out, because it was like, oh, we could go into a whole rabbit hole about Ralph Klein. This is a Holocaust survivor who's the coach. We could have gone into a whole thing about, you know, the Americans who came. We could have gone and Aulcie. And I know we talked about at the time, hey, how deep do we want to go into Aulcie? Because, you know, you thought, hey, you'd have this other project. But in the same way that with The Last Dance, look, they did a whole 30 for 30 on Dennis Rodman. You could do a whole one on Phil Jackson. You could do a whole one on Steve Kerr and Scottie Pippen. So it had that depth of character and depth of story. And, you know, one of the things that we talk about that I want you to address, you know, we often talk about it's sort of something that's important to me. Yes, I work in sports, but it's really a way to examine the human condition through the filter of sports, not really just sports. Tell us about the significance. You know, we talk about a sports story jumping from the sports page to the front page, right? In Israel of the late 70s, let's call it from 1977 through 1985. To what degree was Aulcie Perry, his life, the relationships, and the ups and downs more than just a sports story?
You need to understand, in Israel in 1977, it was such a different country, and Aulcie can share more about it pretty soon. Everybody takes it personally. I mean, people are stopping Aulcie now on the street, you know, when there is no corona, because nobody is in the street now in Israel. Now they're back, but everybody will stop Aulcie Perry, and they will talk to him like he's a player in Maccabi today. For many people, Aulcie Perry is the first African-American that was ever in Israel. Now, he is not the first African-American, but that's how people see Aulcie.
Let me ask you, because did it, you know, when Dani approached you separately about, obviously you sat for us for the On the Map, but about this film, what was did you have any, because, you know, a lot of athletes, they don't either want to talk about themselves, or they don't really want to have that kind of spotlight, or just the reverse, they only want that spotlight. Where did you sit on that fence? Were you sort of, hey, I welcome it, or be a little bit like worried about, you know, I want to keep these things to myself?
I didn't want to do it at all. I had put so many things away, and I didn't want to open it. I ran from Dani for about 2 or 3 years, but he kept coming and kept asking me and asking it, and finally I had
Aneurysm of the aorta.
You relented. You relented.
Yeah, and I relented because I had an aneurysm of my aorta, and I almost died. And I realized that my story needs to be told. It needs to be heard because it's much more than the basketball. It's much more than me coming to Maccabi and winning championships. My story, my story and my family story, I found out began in the 1700s. My great-great-grandparents and my great-grandparents were born into slavery, and that's one thing that hurt me and touched me my whole life.
Did you feel, and I have to ask you this, because, you know, there's the great story of you, you know, one of being the final cut on the New York Knicks in training camp, and I believe it was in 76 or 75. And you were looking at your array of choices in the basketball world. And I mean, when the opportunity to go to Tel Aviv, Israel, which Maccabi was not at the time a global powerhouse in the way it is now. I mean, when you arrived, you know, at Ben Gurion Airport, 1976, I don't know if was it Loa Airport still at that point?
You know, it was Ben Gurion.
It was still okay. At that point, I mean, literally take us through your experience, because the first time I went to Israel was 1984. When I think the difference between Israel in 1984 and now, it's like a completely different universe. But in 1976, I mean, what was that? And did you have any sense of what you were walking into?
No, it was unbelievable because the team had been away for about 2 weeks doing practice game in Europe before the season. So, and we got there was Friday evening, Shabbat evening. They said, look, we've been away for some time. We're going to stay with our families this week. But you're staying in the Sheraton, so after you eat, walk up to Dizengoff Street and get a feeling of what Israel is all about.
It was only Dizengoff.
And I was already kind of nervous because the language, I thought everybody was fighting and arguing all the time. The language was so hard for me. So I walked up I ate and I walked up to Dizengoff, and there's hundreds of people walking up and down the street. And before I knew it, they were around me and surrounding me, and they were talking and pointing, and they started to grab me and touch me. Scared the daylights out of me. I said, what, racism here too? I ran and I jumped in a taxi and went back to the hotel and didn't come out till practice. And my teammates came to pick me up for practice. I said, what did you sit me up there for? If you don't want me here, you should have told me. I would have never came. They said, Aulcie, you're crazy. They wrote about you in the paper all the weekend that you're the new player for Maccabi. They love you. Don't worry about it. I said, thank God.
Well, did you, I mean, in point of fact, I mean, did you, because, you know, to Dani's point, I know it's made in the film, you know, it wasn't like even in the 80s when there was obviously an immigration from Ethiopia and there were more, you know, Black people in Israel, African Americans. But at the time, you know, how do you contrast the difference between, let's say, hey, feeling a little bit unnerved by the way people looked at you maybe in the United States and feeling a racist thing versus in Israel, it's almost, you were a novelty purely also just because of the reality of the situation. There just weren't that many people who looked like you. It'd be like being an American in Japan, or you know what I mean?
I was a 6'10" black man. So, but it wasn't a racial thing. You know, I was just different. It wasn't like how I felt in you know, both of my grandparents is from super rural North Carolina. So most of my childhood would go back and forth to North Carolina. So I know what race is. I was born under the Jim Crow law, so I know what it is, and no question about it. And I never felt that in Israel. I never felt it, And even in Europe, traveling and going throughout Europe and playing, I never felt what I felt in America as far as race. I never, in all my years.
How would you go ahead, Dani?
It's one of the most beautiful things that, you know, we are trying to show in this film is that people are not aware of this side of Israel. And when African American basketball players are coming, they see, you know, a beautiful country that really don't judge the color, because, you know, Israel, for sure, 1977, but even now, you know, we are still post-traumatic from the racism that we have faced. And I would love to hear a little bit about it from, and there are so many other African-American players that came to Israel after, but it will be incredible to hear about it from another legendary player that is also with us, and we'll love to also honor Aulcie, Chris Gubish, if you can put on David Blue. And if I'm not mistaken, one of our pioneers is here, and that's Tal Brody. And that's, you know, we would love, because really he was the one that also called him at some point Big Brother. He was like always his big brother. And where he came from, you know, I think that was the place that, you know, they both felt, you know, they're doing something for the country. And that's why I mentioned everybody in Israel, you know, as much as we'll make unbelievable sports stories in Israel, they take it personally. You know, for them, Aulcie, Tal Brody, they really represent the country.
Well, you know, one of the interesting things also, you know, having spoken to a number of players, American players who've played abroad, there's David Blue, who I followed for years, graduate of Westchester High.
Westchester High School.
Westchester High School here in LA, the
Yeah.
Comets, top school, and then obviously went to USC, which is just down that next door, and then, you know, starred for, I want to say, 3 championship teams in
two EuroLeague championship teams.
EuroLeague championships. And, you know, for those who don't know, I mean, look, we're celebrating in LA the Lakers NBA title. It's their 17th as a franchise, you know, I think 11th in LA. But Maccabi Tel Aviv, I don't think it's a stretch to say at all, outside of the NBA, is one of the top 5 teams in the history of you know, European basketball. At this point has been a, you know, title contender, obviously in Israel, but, you know, on the European scale for going on 40 years. And with championships literally in every decade, or, you know, appearances with a litany of great players. You know, let me ask you a question, David, just because you're with us, and thank you. How much of the story did you know? And how much of it was sort of a surprise to you, or some new information, or just offered a new context or perspective that you hadn't thought about before?
Well, I played for Maccabi for 7 years. So throughout those 7 years, I got to know Aulcie and all the guys that were on some of the past teams. As far as Aulcie's personal story, I knew quite a bit just from being around Aulcie and talking to him, and also some of the guys he played with, and just sort of understanding the history of Maccabi and Aulcie's role, certainly. And I was also mostly aware of the feeling of being part of a family with Maccabi. And so, you know, when I watched the film Aulcie, the way that the team sort of rallied around him and sort of embraced him, that's Maccabi. That's what the organization is all about. For my 7 years, that's how I felt. I feel like I'm a part of the Maccabi family, and always will be. So I get it. And then the funny story, when Aulcie talked about he was walking down the street, thought they were arguing with each other. That's totally what I thought too. You know, I was walking through Jaffa and I'm seeing the Israelis arguing, or they're not really arguing, they're just bartering, I guess. But at the time I was like, why are they so angry at each other? And then someone told me they love each other. So.
Well, let me ask you, KJ, because this is, I have to imagine a slice of sports and Israel that you had not necessarily encountered prior to seeing the film. And so, you know, at a time when obviously, and certainly the NBA athletes have taken a lead, and the league has taken a lead on the social justice front in terms of bridging gaps. And when you see now, you know, players like LeBron, players like Kyrie Irving, obviously taking a very vocal lead, And when you see a trailblazer, like a guy like Aulcie, almost an unwitting trailblazer, you know, and then to the history he made, to the connections he's made to multiple generations of Israelis and Jews on, you know, both sides of the world. What was your reaction to sort of seeing the film, and, you know, did it give you a different sense of Israel and also the place of how sports can bridge some cultures?
Yeah, well, just to say, first and foremost, I'm from Los Angeles, born and raised in Los Angeles, and my family is heavily involved in basketball. I went to UCLA, and my brother played basketball. My father played in NFL football. So we are a sports family, very much so. But I'll be honest, I had never heard of Aulcie before I saw this documentary. I've never been to Israel, although I've been to like 50 different countries around the world. So it was just a different story, and it was just so invigorating and so exciting to see someone like Aulcie, who come from very challenging times and a challenging area in the United States, go over to Israel and be embraced. And I wasn't surprised, to be honest, because many Black Americans will tell you that it is often the most discrimination that we face is right here on our native soil in America, and that when we go abroad, we're actually welcome. So when I saw Aulcie being welcome, I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised at the way that he really just absorbed the culture of Israel and the Jewish people and really became one. So it was just shocking to me to see that. But it was really just a breath of fresh air. I mean, I always had thought that Israel was a welcoming place, even though I've never been there yet. But I wasn't surprised in that sense that they embraced him, but it was nice to see a story and see that the culture really embraced basketball the way we do here, and particularly now. I mean, we are living in a very interesting time, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask Aulcie. I was really just interested in hearing what you think of all the racial unrest that's happening now as you live in Israel. I mean, you came from a place where you saw a lot of racial unrest, and to see it happening decades later after many people in this country thought we had surpassed that. I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think about what's happening here now in this country.
It's a shame, because my senior year in high school, with the riots came to New Orleans, and we had tanks rolling up and down the street. My neighbors sitting watching news, bullets ricocheting off the walls and people dying. I thought that was behind me. I thought I would never have to see that again. And now I'm sitting here and watching the same thing going on now across America. And so it's heartening. It really is. It really is. After so many years, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. You know?
Yeah. The more things stay the same, the more they change.
Yes. Unbelievable.
Let me ask you this, Aulcie, as you watch the film, because you have different perspectives from different, you know, not just athletes, entertainers, whomever. When you do a documentary, some subjects really like the unearthing of things. I know you said that you sort of ran away from Dani, but when you watch the films, what are the things that make you the most emotional, bring you some joy? What are the things that are hardest for you to watch?
What brings me the joy was the 9 years that I played for Maccabi. Nowhere and no other team that I could have went to that I would have received or would have been able to accomplish the things that I did with Maccabi. So that's it. And now we have a new grandbaby here, Yael. She's done took my heart. So that's another thing. But also the competition, the way we played, and we had four players. We had 4 players in the starting 5 for 9 years. You never heard something like that, and you never will or see it. So that was just something unbelievable. We never started a game with the idea that we were going to lose. It was unbelievable. We had seasons where we lost only 4 or 5 games, you know, and it was just unbelievable experience, just winning and playing all over the world. I couldn't ask for nothing better.
And as far as what was for you kind of the most challenging thing to watch as Dani sort of, you know, played storyteller?
The most challenging victory?
No, the most challenging thing for you to experience as a viewer watching your story on the screen.
The most challenging started in '83 when the body gave out, but and I didn't prepare myself for the end, and I just couldn't in my mind all my life. Since, let me start from the beginning. I was blessed, 13 and a half years old. I was 6'5", 2 meters. And from that moment, for me, this was the way out of a bad situation I was born in. I played basketball every day. In the rain, in the snow, it didn't matter. This was my way out. And in '83, when the body gave out, I couldn't imagine that I have to stop playing basketball, and I hadn't prepared myself for the day after. So that was the most difficult period from '83 until until I really went down and got involved with drugs. That was the most difficult period in my life. But there, it saved my life because it put me back in focus on the things that I had to do and the things that I had to straighten out to get my life back together. And I was lucky that I wasn't in a high-level prison. I was in a white-collar crime, so I was with a lot of Wall Street guys and a lot of Jewish guys, unfortunately. But they helped me, and they helped me in a lot of ways. Also, Lubavitch.
Well, the one thing I just want to turn back to Dani for a second. I mean, I think, look, unlike today where you have such blanket coverage of Maccabi Tel Aviv and news and everything like that, obviously some of these chapters were in a, let's call it pre-Startup Nation version of Israel when everything was not broadcast and put on the internet. Tell us about some of the ways that you chose to depict these chapters in Aulcie's life that did not have sort of blanket coverage or news clips.
For me, one of the most moving moments, and I think for you, John, too, because I remember you tearing when we were looking at one of the many rough cuts of the film, is when Aulcie is actually coming back to Israel and coming back to Shamluk, who is like his father figure, and the country embraces him. And I felt like almost, you know what, that's, you know, there is a beacon of why you're making a film. So for me, there are two moments. And one of them is the moment when he hugs Shamluk. So it's one redemption. And the second is the moment when Aulcie hugs Sierra. And that's kind of like a second redemption. It's like, okay, you know, why are you making this film? Okay, for those moments. It is for that. So I understand, because for Aulcie, I mean, all he knew in his life, and as he mentioned right now, is there is either basketball or the ghetto. And when basketball is over, what comes in is the ghetto. And the fact that I think, and Aulcie can spread some light about it, and possibly maybe David Blue, you can also talk about it, because you also had to retire when you were at the peak of your career. David Blue, which by the way, you look amazing. You're like Benjamin Button. You're going back.
Yeah. Well, you know, I
remember begging you not to retire. You were at the top of your career and you're saying, no, you know, I want to. So that's tough. I mean, you know what? I was always thinking that I will be one of you guys. I will be a basketball player, a soccer player. And, you know, as a filmmaker, I'm still young, but you guys, you know, you're young and you need to say, oh, I'm retiring, even saying that word, you know. So David, Aulcie.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dani. Thank you for the compliment. At 40, I realized that my purpose in life now is all about self-preservation. So it used to be winning games, and now I don't want to be in pain anymore. But you know, my experience with retirement was I retired twice. So I played 10 years and then I retired. And part of that was my body was starting to hurt, but also I wanted to go back to school to get my degree because I didn't know what I was going to do after I retired. When I did graduate and get my degree, I had a lot of challenges because I was no longer a student with a purpose to graduate, and I was no longer an athlete. So I was just stuck in this world of in between. And so that's why I came back to Maccabi, was to get back on the court in my comfort zone and learn about different industries to prepare myself for that retirement. And I retired and I came out, but I still have my challenges. And 6 years now later, after my final retirement, I really feel good about life, and I feel happy, and I feel like my life is more manageable at this time. But for a long time, for many years, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm fortunate. I'm the product of Aulcie's love to the Jewish people. My father's Black, my mother's Jewish. So I'm in the middle of really, what we're talking about here, and I'm the product of it. So I really feel it. I was fortunate enough to be born into a situation where I was able to, basketball wasn't my only way out, but dealing with some of the issues I dealt with, basketball was my way to move past it. So I know what it feels like to be an athlete, and basketball is your whole life. And then once you retire, or once the retirement is upon you, that's when the panicking starts happening, and sometimes you make bad decisions. I certainly made my own. Aulcie, to watch you and to know your story, and to know you, to see you now and to watch the movie was very, I cried. I had a lot of connection to the movie, to the characters in the movie, to the images in the movie. It was fantastic to see Israel again, and just to learn more about your story, Aulcie, was fantastic. And I'm so humbled and honored to know you, and to think of you and all the ex-Maccabi players as mentors for me.
Thank you so much. You're the man, though. You're the man. Such great years with you here, and I hope to see you soon. I really do.
Yeah.
By the way, I have to say, and I'll speak for. So my wife went to UCLA. My mom went to UCLA Business School. So I had to it was a very difficult thing for me, because I followed David's career in high school. It's like, oh my God, this guy is Jewish. He's Black. I love him just from a distance, and he's killing UCLA. But then when he went to Maccabi Tel Aviv, it was the perfect thing. So I don't know, Hilary, if we want to maybe open it up to some questions from the chat, or maybe if Consul Newman, if you had some questions, I obviously want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if KJ may have had any other questions.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you, Aulcie, I know you are such an inspiration to so many people all around the world, and I know you speak to many young people still. I'd love to know what you'd like to tell young Black American boys growing up in the U.S. now that still have dreams, even if they can't make the NBA here, what the world has for them. Any words of encouragement?
Through my experience and my ups and my downs, and I go around the country now, and I'm working with kids at risk. A lot of things, managers. 6 things that I take with me that I try to put my life inside, and I work with it. And the first thing I tell them, it takes only one person to believe you. You don't need an army of people. That's it. Just one person to believe in you. It could be your teacher, it could be your neighbor. It's just one person. One thing that I learned very early in my basketball, I was maybe 13, and I was fooling around in practice, and the coach called me over. He said, Aulcie, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. That's something I took with me all my career as a basketball player, to be in shape and to make sure. But it's even more than that. I take it with me in everything I do in my life now. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Share your fears with somebody you trust. That's something I didn't do. That's something another mistake that I made in life. I was ashamed, and I was afraid to really talk about what my fears and everything. Have a contingency plan. You have to look back. You have to think about and look at tomorrow. That's one of very, very important. Each one teach one. I grew up like that. Each one teach one. Always as the basketball player, always looked at the seniors to learn something. So as managers also, you can't grow unless you help someone else grow. It's even. So you have to look out. And the last thing that I try to tell all the young kids, the most important thing is to believe in yourself. And that's it. And so I try to carry that and try to instill that in the managers that I talk to. Winning team. I have a seminar that I do is the winning team. All the top managers, companies in Israel, and kids. I go to high schools and do go to high schools and I do my lectures and I talk to them and I work with kids at this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Let's hear from Chris for a minute about composing the music for this, because it was extraordinary, and it just became another layer to the film. So, Chris, talk about that.
Well, I will say I'm extremely lucky that music's very important to Dani. You know, he puts his films together like a songwriter. I think, you know, there's lots of allegories and things are happening on many different levels. But no, it's really it's a delightful, a really wonderful experience. You know, we'll be working on the story, and Dani will come back, and I think we need another theme here, you know, or I think we need another theme, and you know, you watch the score sort of build itself, you know, as the movie's developing, and it's wonderful that we've had have the opportunity to kind of work with Dani from the very beginning. So sometimes these scores, the music, you know, been working on and off for a year. So that's a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, and in many ways, you know, what we've done, Chris and I, you know, we captured it really as a love story, because it's a love story between Aulcie and the country, a love story between Aulcie and Tammy, and a love story between Aulcie and Shamluk, Aulcie and Maccabi, Aulcie and his family and his new family by finding his daughter. So many times we say, oh, let's bring that element back. Let's bring that element back. Or let's, you know, capture everything together, because this is the moment of redemption. And Chris was incredible with his emotion. And I have to give a shout out to Drew Lahat, our editor, and to Asaf Zellner that did the animation. We were like really a team, and it was like kind of like we were all around players. And many times, you know, even Asaf that did the animation, because he's close to Aulcie in Israel and is part of the family, you know, we were talking to Aulcie and we said, you know what, there is more that you can share with us. And we needed, for Aulcie it was hard, but we needed the pain, we needed to find those moments, because part of what Chris was trying to do with the music was the things that we were trying to do with the movie, is show the bittersweetness. Now we know the sweetness. We know that Maccabi won. We know that Aulcie came back. We know there is a happy ending even with Sierra, but it was very important for us to also share the pain that Aulcie had. And as hard as it was for Aulcie, I felt like he was at the end very courageous to do it with us. Our company is Hey Jude Productions. It's from the line of the Beatles. Take a sad song and make it better. We're always trying to kind of bring things and show the bittersweetness of them. And we, you know, we're not making films about Michael Jordan or Kareem. John is doing it, but we're making stories that people don't know. Sometimes they're overlooked. And that was part of Aulcie's story. So we're non-for-profit. We call ourselves On the Map Foundation, and really with the support of people, we're making things happen. So whoever wants to support us, maybe even win a basketball signed by Tal Brody, Aulcie Perry, and our team, you know, Maccabi Tel Aviv won. Please support us, support the Jewish Film Festival, because that's how we are making these films. That's how we are making this journey. But it really is, in many ways, it's really a labor of love. I felt very fortunate. I'm a Maccabi fan, so when you're making your work as your hobby, I mean, that's the most you can ask yourself in life. And we just really came out of love, and there are so many people that love Aulcie. I think that was part of the secret.
All right, let's take a couple of questions here. Okay, I see. First, I want to tell you, Aulcie, there's a few people here who know you. We have Louis Lassoff is on this Zoom. He's Howard Lassoff's younger brother, who is your teammate, and he wanted to give you a shout out and say hello.
Okay, thank you.
And
his brother was a very close friend of mine.
And we remember Howie really well. And
Great guy. Great guy.
Alex Lassoff is here too. He's the son of Howard. You got his son and his brother.
Wow.
Arnell Jenkins, he went to high school with you and had a question about how you felt about West Side High in the 60s.
Rough Riders, just tell them, us Rough Riders are here to stay.
Okay, let me.
I'd like to tell Aulcie, if I can, so hard to be a Rough Rider.
I know, how you doing, man? I see, buddy.
Good guy. Very good. Very good guy.
Let me ask you a question. Aulcie, just because it is timely. So, it's probably the highest rated Israeli basketball prospect ever is Dani Avdija, who's I think probably going to be a top 10 pick this year in the NBA draft. And you think about,
I think the top 5.
Oh, top 5. And you think about, I don't think it's a stretch to say, here's a guy whose father was Serbian, whose mother was, whose father came to Israel because of what was going on in the former Yugoslavia. And it is, you are a trailblazer. You can draw a very clean line from guys like that, leaving other places to come to Israel. And now you have, obviously you had your success. There's been a number of sort of dual nationals who played in Israel. And now you have a guy who's probably going to be, I think, hey, if, with any hope, this is a guy who can help Israel, in international competition. Give us your, 1 to 2 minute, draft report card on Dani Avdija. Like, who do you compare him to? Is he the best player Israel's produced?
Very, very talented. He's still got a lot of work to do, but he's hungry. His father was a very decent ball player, and he's been training him from a very young age. He's going to be a good pro. I don't know if he's going to be a superstar, but he's going to be a good pro because he has all the tools, and he also has the tools to become a superstar. Let's see how it works out. See if he stays healthy. He's a good player. And I've watched. He grew up in my club, so I've been watching him a long time.
Very interesting. I don't know if KJ, if you have any questions, or Dani, my only challenge, Hilary, is I am on a shoot and I do have to return to it. So I don't want to.
Okay. We can let you go, but there's a couple of questions here. Actually, I'm going to go for the most loaded question, and this is from somebody that says, "Hi, John." So her name is Kathy Greenlee.
Okay.
Okay. This is a loaded question. Aulcie, with the Black Lives Matter movement so strong in the United States and so much anti-Israeli sentiments, what would you say to African Americans in the U.S. about supporting Israel?
For sure. Everything, it has to be a positive conversation. I think the politics is what's making the situation a lot worse right now. And we all know who is doing that. I think it's just pure politics right now. I think you take the politics out of it, everything will smooth itself out.
KJ, do you have anything you want to add about this?
Yeah, it's so, I'd love to get your thoughts kind of, Aulcie, of how you see all the athletes. I think, John, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, all these athletes that are participating in the Black Lives Matter protest. In the beginning, a lot of them were not wanting to play games. Before that, we even had the kneeling. athletes and getting political has become the norm now. And there was a time where people were saying you didn't mix politics with sports, even though Muhammad Ali may, if he were still around, he would see it differently, obviously. But I'm just wondering what you think about the intersection of sports and politics being essential now in this kind of day and age.
Okay. In that sense, what you're talking about, that side of politics where you're demonstrating or you're speaking about being fair or not being fair, that's altogether different than rioting and doing something illegal. That I'm not down with that at all. But to demonstrate and to voice your opinion about something that's not right, I'm with that 100%. The football players kneeling in the game to demonstrate what African American young Black African American kids go through, and like they said, I don't see no white parents telling their kids when they go out in the evening that if the cop stopped you, put both hands on the steering wheel. I don't see that in their families. So that's the type of politics I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the kind I see coming out of the White House.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see what happens in November.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
Hilary, team Aulcie, thanks so much. It's been really
John,
my pleasure.
Thank you so much, John. Good luck with your shoot. Thank you
I
for
appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
John, thank you so much. And I would also love to welcome our wonderful ambassador of goodwill for the States of Israel, Tal Brody, our hero from On the Map. That's really, you know what, and Tal can also weigh into that, without going into politics at all, because I think when we're talking about racism, there is no politics. And I think, we faced, Tal and I were traveling a lot in the United States, and we faced it through basketball. You can also learn about the brotherhood that exists between the Jews and the African American. And we have here Aulcie Perry. We have here David Blue, and what are they more? Are they more Jews? They're more Israelis? They're more African American? All of them, all of the above. And I think that's what we want to emphasize. We want to emphasize the love, and we want to forget, and hopefully it will be vanished from our world. We want to forget the hate. And Tal, really honored. We're honored that you're with us. But even
Tal Brody, the true ambassador.
Yes. Even
Tal Brody, the true
Brody,
ambassador and friend.
You were always like a big brother for Aulcie Perry, and as you mentioned a lot of times, there are no colors in basketball, right?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I enjoyed the whole program, and it's great that to be looking from the outside to the inside instead of participating and speaking all the time. Aulcie and I, we've been seeing each other between the lockdowns. First time about for 2-3 months, we were locked down, and now in the first wave, and now in the second wave, 1 month. So I hope we don't have another wave so we can see each other as we do all the time. And I think one thing to supplement, you asked Aulcie a question, but Aulcie, after basketball, what you're talking about, Aulcie is an unbelievable asset to the country. He's teaching youth. As he said, he's teaching business managers, and he's coaching some of the Maccabi teams. And he has an unbelievable sport camp in the summer at the Wingate Institute that even young youth are coming from the United States to Israel to participate in his basketball camp. So he's quite busy. And but my wife and I, we see Ahuva and Aulcie quite often. And we're all suffering from this lockdown, but it was over actually today. But we hope everybody will be the same discipline as you have in basketball, and it won't last. But everything was great. I feel that Aulcie has been a magnet, of bringing we have about 800 African-American basketball players that have played in Israel throughout the years. I'm going to the NBA All-Star Weekend every year, and everybody, all of a sudden, I see somebody calling me, Tal, how are you? It's like, Tal, Manishma, and I'm looking around to see who, and I see guys that have been to Israel. The NBA All-Star teams have come to Israel. I hosted Dr. J, Magic Johnson was here. I mean, all through the years, NBA teams have been coming to Israel. And even KJ, I hosted the NFL football teams that were here. My heroes when I was growing up was Jim Brown, Roger Staubach, Joe Montana, the former ambassador in Washington. We hosted them together when their first day in Israel. And Robert Kraft brought them twice to Israel before we received the highest prize in Israel for civilian was the Israel Prize. He received $1 million prize, but he gave back the $1 million and added 19 million to fight anti-Semitism.
Oh,
now,
wow.
When you're talking about what you mentioned before, Jewish history and Black Lives history is quite similar. Yes. Even in Atlanta, Georgia, we had a player, he's also, Aulcie knows him very well. He's before David's time, but Levon Mercer, we had even for Passover, the African-American community together with the Jewish community, and we had a pastor talking about slavery, the times before Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s, and then the rabbi was talking about going out to Egypt and the history of the Jews, you know, and it's quite a similar history, and that's why we feel that Black Lives Matter has been infiltrated with Louis Farrakhan's. You know, his messages aren't really messages. A lot of people don't believe it. You know, they don't like the message, but they like the messenger, and that's it's like Nick Cannon said. You know, but you know, there's people in there that brought in a lot of groups that are holding up signs against Israel, against the Jews, and many of the young Black community don't really know how intertwined the Jewish community has been for Black, you know, for Black within Black history. Yeah. Aulcie and I, we were together and we hosted Martin Luther King Jr. III in Israel. And believe me, I don't think you even know this, Kathy, is that when I asked Martin Luther King Jr. III, and I asked him, how come did you come to Israel for 2 days? He says, well, this fella that I'm here for his 93rd birthday, you people in Los Angeles know him, Meshulam Riklis, he passed away. But he says, this guy, Meshulam Riklis, he helped my father in 3 ways. And when I asked him, how did he help your father? He says that one time, twice, he bailed him out of jail. The second time, he helped fund the movement. And every time that he had to go to New York because he didn't have money, you know, money to spend on hotels and everything, it was this Jewish Israeli guy that gave him apartments in New York. And the main thing he did was he gave the order, mostly in the South, to the McClory's department stores, that they should, 1,500 department stores to be integrated. Now, nobody says this to be integrated when the whole thing in the 60s was segregation. Now, there's so many things out there, the Jewish, the rabbis, the Jewish college kids that went down to Mississippi and some were killed, but they marched. But none of the young community, none of the Black players, the guys that are in these marches and everything of today, they're not educated about how the Jews really helped in that period of time. And like what Aulcie's talking about North Carolina, well, Aulcie, I know so well because we came from New Jersey, first of all, Newark, and I came from Trenton. But I played with 10 African-American basketball players. I played on a public school. And Aulcie's talking about North Carolina. Well, the Atlantic Coast Conference was one of the best conferences in the U.S. And so when I was invited down to the South to go to North Carolina, and it was in Raleigh, it was North Carolina State. So when I got off the plane, and all of a sudden when I wanted to go to the bathroom, they yelled at me and said, "Hey, you can't go to the bathroom there." I said, "I got to go to the bathroom." But they said, so I said, they said, "Why?" He said, "Don't you see the sign? That's a black bathroom. That's the white bathroom. That's the black water fountain. That's the white water fountain." And I said to myself, no matter what I see in this school, I'm not going to go down here to go to school if that's what the situation in the South. Now, because I was in the period of time in the 60s, I don't think Black lives in the matter. There's incidents that have happened because, not all the police is bad, but some of the police that did some of these accidents has made a turnaround and all this type of stuff that was going on. I don't think the Black community is suffering like in the 60s. I know what was in the 60s because I played on teams. And when I went to the universities, I saw the differences at that period of time when we played teams that were all white teams. We went down to Kentucky with Pat Riley and Louis Dampier. When Adolph Rupp was coaching, you didn't see any Black players down there. So I really don't think any Black person in America today feels that feels that every place he goes, he feels that he's that biased or something like that. In retrospect, I think it's the best time. There's the politics of everything that's happening because it's an election. It's bringing out a lot of stuff in order to vote. But I think more Black people have changed to the Democratic Party because they're working in the communities and stuff. So, but that's politics. But with Aulcie, he's been a magnet for so many players that have come to Israel. And as he said, for an African American that coming to Israel, he could go to China and get a lot more money. He can play you can play in Europe and make a lot more money. But in Israel, he has a life before and after basketball. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because in Israel, you don't feel white, you don't feel Black. We have over 120,000 Ethiopians today in Israel, and another 2,000 are coming in. So how could they say Israel is a racist country? There's no place in the world that is perfect. And Israel is not a perfect country, but it's a beautiful country. And now that we have the United Arab Emirates and we have Bahrain, we're going to have a basketball program. I'm putting together a basketball program with a guy, Sam Vincent, that he's the national coach in Bahrain. So we're going to do a U16 tournament between Ted Gustis's team in the public school system in New York, from the Martin Luther King schools, Israel with the Muslim community basketball, with the Muslim, Arab Christian and Nazareth, and in Osifia with the Arab Druze. There's a community Druze, and then Maccabi Tel Aviv, Bnei Herzliya, Kfar Saba. So they're going to have girls and boys U16 from Bahrain, also from the United Arab Emirates. With Sam, we're putting together a virtual basketball program. That's what basketball is. Basketball is like ping pong when they went to China during Richard Nixon. And Aulcie seen it, I seen it, everything that's been going wherever we played basketball, because the level where we played was respected. In communities today that are more anti-Semitic than they were then in Germany and France. I mean, you go to Belgium, you go to East Europe. I mean, it brought a lot of respect and love for Israel because they saw who we are. They never saw who we are. So I think the fact that Aulcie has been such a big asset to the country, and he's, and it's not only basketball, it's who he is, his personality. I remember you saw it in the movie. In the movie, we were eating, and it was Aulcie and and the guy Floyd. I don't remember his last name, also Floyd, but you know, Aulcie was, in my opinion, he was a better basketball player. But in the movie, it says they took this other guy because of the cakes. This other guy ate all the cakes at the table. But still, Aulcie, I told the coach that Aulcie's better than this guy. He is not. They say that you came to Israel because of the cakes, Aulcie. But this guy ate the cake. But no, you deserve to play. You're much better than the other guy.
Maybe you know, it's a great opportunity because, you know, the fact that, you know, what I will say, my interpretation and to what KJ were mentioning, you know, if our political leaders were like Tal Brody and like Aulcie Perry, I think there were much less racism that both Jews and African American are suffering from. And I will ask our General Consul, maybe Hillel Newman, and also David Blue and Aulcie and KJ, you know, what are ways that we can do without being political? What are the best ways for us to bridge some of the gaps that we have? Because we see two people that are living this bridge, that are living examples, David Blue and Aulcie Perry, that are, you know, a wonderful example for that. How can we enhance more of this bridge to remember the bond of both of us, you know, suffering from anti-Semitism and from racism? And correct me, Tal, if I'm wrong, but I think it was the father of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar that saved Rabbi Lau in the Holocaust.
It's either, I think, it's his friend or his uncle, you know, that
kind of beacon of showing, you know, I think the entire story is within that scene.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that too, and I think there has been a rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism for sure in this country. But I love what we're doing today, and I think having discussions like these and continuing to educate people and talk about our history and what all the things that we have in common and all the things that we suffer with together is one of the ways that we can try to counteract all that negativity that's out there. I mean, we are living in a cesspool of it, obviously, not even mentioning the pandemic that we're dealing with this year, but you add in all the civil unrest and it's tough. It's really been tough. But what we have to do is just continue to educate people, continue to be vigilant when we see any form of anti-Semitism and any form of anti-Black racism. I mean, that's all we can do. Our predecessors, my ancestors have dealt with it. Some things have changed, some things have not changed, but we can't give up. We have to continue to educate people. We have to continue to try to eradicate it. And I think having forums and discussions like these are just vital, particularly in this year and during the times that we're living in.
AJ.
Very nice.
I'll also say a word if possible. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dani, for the question. I think this is a very important issue. And as one who's also served in Islamic countries, I served as ambassador of Israel to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, which are two Muslim countries. And I found, for instance, in Islam, that there are two different Islam. There's an Islam which is very friendly towards the Jews and Israel. It feels that Israel and the Jews are family, all coming from the Abrahamic family. And there's another Islam which is politicized, which we would call the Middle Eastern Islam, which is radicalized and politicized. And this has also brought me to understanding that the world today is split between the moderates and radicals. So it's not split between Jews and Arabs or Jews and Christians or Christians and Muslims. It's between the radicals of this world and the moderates of this world. And if you call the moderates, bringing all the moderates together, then of course, Israel is in the same camp as UAE and Bahrain and Egypt and Jordan. Perhaps it's no coincidence that today, the first unprecedented flight took off from Israel to Bahrain, El Al flight carrying Israeli flag in order to promote the peace and establish diplomatic relations. And why do I say this? Because I think that the problem, if there is a problem between the African-American community and Israel or Jews, it's because of radicalized politicization. It shouldn't be at the grassroots level. And if it is at the grassroots level, it's because of ignorance, of people who do not know the history. And that's why I connect very much to the words of what KJ Matthews said earlier, and that we must tell these stories. We must tell the truth. The best way of challenging these challenges which we have is by getting out there with the truth and vocalized. The problem is that the more radical elements, the more politicized elements, they have vocalized themselves, and they're very provocative in their behavior, and therefore they get the platforms. But we must come out, all of us together as the moderates and the sane ones in this world, and we must make sure that our voice is heard even clearer and louder.
Yeah, thank you so much, Consul Hillel Newman. David, you're also a live example of this bridge. You know, maybe your point of view from a spiritual place.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it, Dani. I think what certainly our world is lacking, at least in America, is a sense of spirit. I know for me, it took me losing everything, being really down, health-wise, relationships-wise, everything-wise, for me to recognize that I'm a human being and that I was put on this planet to enjoy life and to love and to be a part of the planet and to help with the planet. I think that in my opinion, we have lost our sense of humanity. I think that while all the talk is all around policy change and all these different laws, one thing that none of the leaders of both sides have thought to do is just simply have a meal together, break bread, and just talk about things other than what's being talked about. Talk about going fishing or playing sports or raising kids. I think that our leaders in this world have lost the sense that they're humans and they have emotions and they cry, and just like everyone else. And for me personally, it took deep inner work, meditation, mindfulness, eating right, and a lot of reading and quiet time to discover that, you know, we're all connected under this one universe. And until we recognize that, I don't see, you know, much changing. I mean, people write policies. Policies don't write themselves. So until the people who write the policies decide that they want to evolve, then the policies will just be surface. So I think it's on all sides. It's on the Black side, the Israeli side, the Jewish side, all around the world. People have forgotten that human beings are the ones that are writing these policies, and human beings need to do the inner work and also the outer work, including fitness and eating right and self-care, until you can actually create change on a global macro level. It has to start within each person. So I've gone through that metamorphosis myself, and you know, that's what I've come to realize, that you know, deep inner work is really the only way that's going to stop racism, because racism is simply a symptom of a human emotion that is, you know, that you can't see because the ego is blocking it. So that's what I think.
That's wonderful. I think that we should end on this note. Let's all see, you have something to add. We've been on for a long time. And you're muted. Aulcie, you're muted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to mention, like, just for what David has said.
I want you to talk about that.
That will be like a wonderful conclusion. That, you know, I always see the world, and you know, our rounded world like a basketball that has so many colors and so many diversity. And at some point, you know, we have place for everyone on the map. And like Tal Brody has mentioned, we even have a place for Israel on the map. And what Aulcie and Tal Brody and this team have made, you know, changed our life. And David, thank you so much for your voice and your contribution in putting Maccabi Tel Aviv on the map. And KJ, thank you so much for reminding us our humanity and your kind words. And Hilary, the opportunity that you gave us to show the film. And I'm really honored to be the one telling that story, but it is really thanks to so many people that have so much wonderful soul that we can bring that message. And I think in a time like this, it's more important than ever. So I'm honored, and we can almost conclude, and Hilary, before I give it to you, with the reason that we are here is giving the award to Aulcie for being a bridge between Jews, African American, and the example that you showed to our country. So we're very proud of you, Aulcie. Thank you so much, and I hope the love that we gave you now will carry for a long time, and we will continue doing good things together.
Okay. Thank you, Dani. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much to everybody on the panel. Dani, do you want to talk about how people can get the ball?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Gubish can share a link to how people can get the ball. We are at heyjudeproductions.com, and we're on the Map Foundation, and everything, every support or donation is non-for-profit, tax deductible, and can help us telling more good, non-political, positive stories from Israel and more good stories to the world. I feel like the world needs it. For sure, we have the need to tell it. So I hope also the world have a need to accept it.
Great, thank you. And I just want to let our audience know, some of you may not have gotten a chance to see the film yet. We've sent the link out a few times. If you go back to your confirmation, you will scroll down and see that the link is there. I would be happy to send it again to all our attendees, and to those who have not purchased a ticket yet. We're going to extend the window to watch the film for another 24 hours. So if you haven't seen it yet, don't worry, you will definitely get the chance to see it. And this is being recorded, so it will live on our Facebook page, Los Angeles Jewish Film Festival. And within about a day, we will have it posted on the homepage of our website. If you want to watch it again, or if you want to share it with others. So thank you to everybody on the panel, and thank you to our audience. And certainly thank you to Dani for your beautiful film, and for Aulcie for opening up your heart and telling the world your story.
Thank you. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.